The automatic glass doors of the ultra-exclusive Beverly Hills luxury car dealership slid open with a whisper, soft hiss, admitting a figure who seemed to belong to a different universe entirely. John Michael Osbourne, known to the world as Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the godfather of heavy metal, frontman of Black Sabbath, solo icon, whose voice had shredded eardrums and defined generations, stepped across the threshold in faded black jeans that had seen better decades, a threadbare Black Sabbath tour t-shirt from the 1981 Mob Rules era, scuffed motorcycle boots, and a pair of aviator sunglasses that hid eyes that had stared down stadiums of screaming fans and the chaos of his own legend. No entourage, no manager, no security detail. Just Ozzy alone, hands in pockets, moving with the unhurried gait of a man who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. The showroom was a cathedral of wealth-polished marble floors reflecting the gleam of million-dollar hypercars, crystal chandeliers, casting prismatic light across carbon fiber curves, the faint scent of Italian leather, and new money hanging in the air like incense. Sales associates in tailored suits glided between vehicles with the practiced arrogance of gatekeepers to an elite kingdom, their smiles sharp as switchblades, their eyes scanning for the telltale signs of disposable income, designer watches, limited edition sneakers, the subtle flex of a black card. Ozzy's arrival registered on their radar like a blip from a broken machine. Derek, the top closer with a smirk permanently etched into his face, leaned against the hood of a matte black Bugatti Chiron and muttered to his colleague Victor without bothering to lower his voice. "Check out the time traveler. Bet he thinks this is a museum." Victor, area sales manager with a Rolex that cost more than most people's houses, didn't even glance up from his phone. Let him wonder. Guys like that come in touch. The seats take selfies and leave. Waste of oxygen. Their laughter was low, conspiratorial, the sound of men who measured human worth in quarterly commissions. Ozzy paid them no mind. He drifted toward a McLaren 720S Spider in liquid silver, its dihedral doors raised like the wings of a predatory bird. He circled it slowly, trailing a calloused fingertip along the aerodynamic lines, peering through the glass at the Alcantara interior, the digital cockpit glowing like a spaceship. His reflection in the paint was ghostly sunglasses, wild hair barely tamed under a faded bandana, the faint scar on his lip from a stage dive gone wrong in 1975. He looked like a roadie who had wandered off tour, not the man whose face had been on the cover of Rolling Stone more times than most of these salespeople had closed deals. Emily Thompson, the newest receptionist, hired only 3 weeks ago after scraping through community college on night shifts, and sheer grit sat behind the crescent-shaped marble desk, her uniform crisp, her smile genuine in a sea of plastic pleasantries. She noticed the man immediately, not because of who he might be, but because he moved differently. No swagger, no entitlement, just quiet curiosity. When he approached her station, she stood without hesitation. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Apex Motors. Would you like a brochure, or may I show you something specific?" Her voice was warm, Midwestern, tinged the kind of politeness that came from being raised to treat everyone like they might be your neighbor. Ozzy removed his sunglasses, folding them into his pocket, and met her eyes, dark intense, carrying the weight of 1,000 nights under stage lights and 1,000,000 miles on the road. "Just browsing, love. Mind if I sit and flip through the catalog?" Emily slid a glossy booklet across the desk, along with a chilled bottle of Fiji water she had been saving for VIPs. "Take your time. If you have any questions, I'm right here." Derek, watching from across the floor, rolled his eyes so hard it was audible. "Great! Now she's wasting inventory on walk-ins." Victor snorted. Tell her to comp the water from her paycheck. Ozzy settled into a low-slung leather chair in the corner lounge, the kind designed to make lesser mortals feel small. He opened the catalog with the reverence of a scholar studying ancient texts, turning pages, slowly pausing at the McLaren, then the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, then the limited edition Porsche 918 Spyder. Every so often, he jotted notes in a battered leather notebook with a stubby pencil, prices, horsepower, torque curves, his handwriting spidery but precise. A tech billionaire in a custom Brioni suit breezed in, flanked by an assistant carrying a Hermes briefcase. Derek materialized instantly, all teeth and deference. "Mr. Chen the Koenigsegg, Jesco is prepped for your test drive. Shall we?" Champagne was poured. Keys were presented on a velvet tray. The contrast was surgical. Ozzy watched without reaction, the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Emily refilled his water, unasked, setting down a small plate of imported macarons. "On the house," she whispered. "You look like you've had a long day." Ozzy's grin was crooked genuine. "You have no idea, darling." Minutes stretched into an hour. Victor, growing restless, strode over with the practiced authority of a man who had ejected his share of dreamers. "Sir, this lounge is reserved for clients with confirmed appointments. If you're not ready to move forward today, I'm afraid we'll need the space." The implication was clear. "You don't belong here." Ozzy closed the catalog, stood, and tucked the notebook into his back pocket. His voice when he spoke was the same gravel and honey rasp that had roared war pigs to 80,000 people, now softened to a murmur. "No worries, mate. I've seen what I came to see." He tipped an imaginary hat to Emily, who looked suddenly stricken, as if she had failed him somehow. Derek high-fived Victor behind a display pillar. "Another one bites the dust." But Ozzy didn't head for the exit. Instead, he turned toward the reception desk, his boots echoing on the marble like distant thunder. "Excuse me, love," he said to Emily, who was already reaching for the phone. "Could you ring the general manager for me? Tell him John Osbourne would like a word." Emily's fingers hesitated over the keypad. The name meant nothing to her yet, but something in the man's calm certainty made her dial without question. Upstairs in a glass-walled office overlooking the showroom, Mr. Harrington, general manager, former Wall Street trader turned luxury auto czar, took the call with mild irritation. "Osbourne. Never heard of him. Tell him we're booked solid." Emily's voice was steady. "He says it'll only take a minute, sir. And he's been waiting quite a while." Harrington sighed, adjusted his tie, and descended the spiral staircase like a king granting an audience to a peasant. The showroom had gone unnaturally quiet. Salespeople sensed a shift in the air the way animals feel a storm coming. Ozzy stood by the McLaren, one hand resting on the roof, the other holding his sunglasses like a talisman. Harrington approached, smile tight. "Mr. Osbourne, I understand you've been looking at our inventory. How can we assist you today?" Ozzy removed the bandana, shook out his hair, and looked the man dead in the eye. "I'm here to buy a car, mate. But first I'd like to know why your staff thinks it's acceptable to treat people like garbage based on what they're wearing." Harrington opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Recognition hit like a freight train. The voice, the eyes, the stance. You're Ozzy Osbourne." The words tumbled out in a whisper that carried to every corner of the showroom. Derek's iPad clattered to the floor. Victor's face drained of color. A junior salesman actually gasped. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, but her eyes, wide stunned, held no triumph, only disbelief. Ozzy's smile was slow, almost gentle. "Yeah, that's me. Now, about that McLaren." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Prince of Darkness had arrived, and hell had not followed. Instead, Something far more terrifying had walked through the door: accountability. The silence that followed Harrington's stammered recognition was not the stunned hush of awe. It was the brittle electric quiet that precedes a lightning strike. Every polished surface in the showroom reflected the same tableau: Ozzy Osbourne, hands loose at his sides, standing beside the McLaren 720S Spider, as though he had simply materialized from the carbon fiber itself. The Prince of Darkness wore no crown, no entourage, no visible anger, only the faint, knowing curve of a smile that had survived decades of scandal addiction and resurrection. Harrington's mind raced through damage control protocols he had never needed for a rock star: close the showroom, call, legal offer, lifetime servicing comp, every accessory in the catalog. But Ozzy spoke first, voice low, almost conversational, the Birmingham accent cutting through the sterile air like a switchblade through silk. "Relax, mate. I'm not here to burn the place down. I just want to buy the car." He tapped the McLaren's roof twice, the way a drummer tests a snare. "This one. Full spec. Cash. Today." Harrington's recovery was textbook corporate. A blink, a nod, a pivot to obsequious efficiency. "Of course, Mr. Osborne. We'll have the paperwork ready," and Ozzy lifted a single finger. "One condition." The room leaned in. Derek, still frozen near the fallen iPad, felt his stomach knot. Victor's Rolex suddenly felt like a manacle. Emily, behind the reception desk, clutched the edge so tightly her knuckles blanched. Ozzy turned to her, the movement deliberate, unhurried. "The title goes to Emily Thompson." A beat. "She's the only one in this building who treated me like a human being before she knew my name." Emily's breath hitched audibly. Harrington's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sir, that's highly irregular." Ozzy's laugh was soft, almost kind. "Irregular, mate. I once bit the head off a bat on stage. This is Tuesday." The logistics unfolded with the surreal precision of a fever dream. Harrington personally escorted Ozzy to the glass-walled finance suite overlooking Rodeo Drive, where the city's elite sipped lattes under palm shadows. A notary was summoned from thin air. A wire transfer confirmation, 7 figures, no financing, no trade-in, pinged on the bank's secure portal within 4 minutes. Derek was dispatched to fetch the ceremonial key fob on its obsidian plinth, but his hands shook so badly he dropped it twice. Victor attempted to intercept whispering apologies that piled up like unpaid parking tickets. Ozzy ignored them both. Instead, he asked Emily to join them in the suite. She entered wide-eyed, still, in her uniform, the name tag slightly askew. Harrington tried to usher her to a side chair. Ozzy pulled out the leather seat at the head of the table himself. "You're the client now, love." While the contracts printed, Ozzy leaned back, boots crossed at the ankle, and told a story no one in the room had earned the right to hear. Back in '69, Black Sabbath played a pub in Carlisle. Promoter stiffed us. We had 20 quid between us, slept in the van. Next morning, we rolled into a petrol station looking like we'd been dragged through hell backwards. Attendant took one look, refused to fill the tank. Said we couldn't pay. I was 19, pissed off, ready to swing. Bill Ward, our drummer, puts a hand on my shoulder and says, "Oz dignity's the only thing they can't take unless you give it away." He looked at Emily. "You didn't give yours away today. That's rarer than this car." The paperwork was signed in under 12 minutes. Emily's signature, neat, looping, trembling, appeared beside Ozzy's scrawl, which looked like it had been written during an earthquake. Harrington produced a velvet ribbon for the key handover. Ozzy waved it off. He placed the fob in Emily's palm himself, closing her fingers around it. 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. Don't let Derek drive it. A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension. Outside, the McLaren was rolled onto the forecourt top-down engine, purring like a caged panther. Photographers summoned by who knew what invisible network were already gathering beyond the velvet ropes. Harrington tried to orchestrate a photo op. Ozzy walked straight past the cameras to Emily. First rule of owning a supercar, never let anyone else park it. Second rule, enjoy the hell out of it. He climbed into a waiting black Suburban driven by a silent tattooed figure who had materialized from nowhere and was gone before the flashbulbs could catch him. Inside the dealership, the aftermath was a slow-motion car crash in reverse. Derek was summoned to HR before the McLaren's taillights vanished down Wilshire. Victor spent the afternoon drafting an email titled Immediate Cultural Sensitivity Training Mandatory. Harrington fielded calls from corporate headquarters in Stuttgart promising a full internal review, but the real earthquake was just beginning. A teenage valet moonlighting for gas money had live-streamed the entire exchange on TikTok from the service bay. By the time Ozzy's Suburban hit the 405, the clip captioned, "Ozzy Osbourne buys McLaren gifts it to receptionist who was nice to him," had 1.2 million views. Comments flooded in, "Prince of Darkness has a heart of gold." This is the most metal flex ever. Emily is all of us. Emily, still clutching the key fob like it might dissolve, was escorted to the employee lounge by a tearful co-worker who had never spoken to her before. Her phone buzzed incessantly texts from her mother, her ex-boyfriend, a local news station. She turned it off and stared at the McLaren through the window, its silver paint catching the sunset like liquid mercury. Ozzy, meanwhile, was already miles away, window down, wind whipping through the Suburban. His driver, Rudy, a former Marine who had guarded him through the Ozfest years, glanced in the rear view. "You good, boss?" Ozzy lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply, exhaled toward the open sky. "Never better, mate. Just reminded myself why I still do this." Rudy nodded, knowing better than to ask for details. In the quiet that followed, Ozzy pulled out his phone and typed a single tweet. "Bought a car today. Gave it away. Respect, money. Always." He hit send, then turned the phone face down. The city blurred past neon and palm trees and the endless hum of a metropolis that had forgotten how to be surprised. But somewhere behind him, a young woman was learning to drive a supercar with the radio blasting Paranoid, and the world was about to learn that even legends could still teach humility, one act of grace at a time. The first tremor hit at 7:03 p.m. Pacific Time, when a 17-year-old valet named Matteo, still wearing the grease-stained Apex Motors polo he'd been issued that morning, uploaded a 37-second vertical clip to TikTok. The footage was shaky, half-lit by fluorescent service bay bulbs, but the audio was pristine. Ozzy's gravel road voice slicing through Harrington's panic, the clatter of Derek's iPad, Emily's soft gasp when the key fob landed in her palm. Matteo captioned it, "POV, you're nice to a random dude and he gifts you a McLaren," and added the hashtag #Prince of Kindness. By 7:41 p.m., the video had 4.8 million views. By 8:12 p.m., it breached Twitter's global trending list at number 3, wedged between a presidential gaffe and a K-pop comeback. By 9:00 p.m., the clip had been stitched, duetted, and remixed into Oblivion metalheads, layered Iron Man riffs over the handover. Gen Z comedians lip-synced Harrington's stammer. A drag queen in WeHo recreated the scene in 6-inch heels and a bedazzled McLaren toy car. The internet, for once, agreed on something Ozzy Osbourne had just performed, the most expensive mic drop in automotive history. Across the Atlantic, dawn was breaking over Birmingham. In a terraced house on Lodge Road, the same street where a teenage John Osbourne once nicked coal to keep his family warm, His elderly mother, Lillian, shuffled to the kitchen in slippers, switched on the electric kettle, and opened her tablet to check the racing results. Instead, she found her son's face staring back from every headline. Black Sabbath legend gifts 300T. Supercar to receptionist after snub, screamed the Sun. Ozzy Osbourne proves heavy metal has a heart, declared the BBC. Lillian poured tea with trembling hands, then dialed the only number she still knew by heart. Sharon picked up on the second-ring voice, husky from sleep. "Mom, it's true," she said before Lillian could speak. "He didn't tell me either." Classic Ozzy. In the background, their dogs barked at the television where Sky News looped the valet's footage on a 10-minute cycle. Sharon muted the set, lit a cigarette, and stared at the frozen frame of Ozzy, closing Emily's fingers around the fob. "He's always been like this," she murmured. "Just never let the cameras see the soft parts." Back in Los Angeles, the Apex Motors showroom had become a pilgrimage site. By midnight, a dozen teenagers camped on the sidewalk with homemade signs. "Emily is queen and respect. Rack." Local news vans parked nose to tail, their satellite dishes blooming like metallic flowers. Inside, Harrington had locked the doors and dimmed the lights. But the McLaren still sat center stage under a spotlight engine cover open as if waiting for its new owner to claim it. Emily herself had been whisked to a hotel suite paid for by Corporate Room 1812, overlooking the Hollywood sign, where she sat cross-legged on the king bed in borrowed sweats, phone on airplane mode, staring at the key fob as though it might sprout wings and fly away. Her mother, a night shift nurse from Fontana, arrived at 2:00 a.m., clutching a Tupperware of homemade tamales and crying so hard she could barely speak. "Mija, you always said treat people right," she managed between sobs. "But a car, Dios mío." Emily laughed until she cried, then cried until she laughed again, the sound echoing off marble bathroom tiles that cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. At 3:17 a.m., Ozzy's private jet touched down at Van Nuys Airport. No paparazzi. Rudy had arranged a decoy convoy leaving LAX. Ozzy slipped out a side gate hoodie up and climbed into a dented '97 Dodge Ram that smelled of old vinyl and Jack Daniels. He drove himself radio off windows down the San Fernando Valley, a blur of sodium lights and jacaranda petals. He was headed to the one place in LA that still felt like home, a nondescript storage unit in North Hollywood, where he kept relics too battered for the mansion tour, laminates a cracked mirror from the 1982 Diary of a Madman tour, the dove cage from the infamous Des Moines incident. He unlocked the roll-up door, flicked on a single bulb, and sat on an amp case older than most of his grandchildren. From his pocket, he pulled the battered leather notebook he'd used in the showroom. On a fresh page, he wrote in blocky capitals, "Respect is the only currency that never devalues." Then he tore the page out, folded it into a paper airplane, and launched it into the darkness. It landed beside a stack of gold records gathering dust. Morning brought a deluge of offers. Netflix wanted a docuseries Ozzy, The Kindness Chronicles. Vogue wanted Emily for a Women Who Inspire shoot. The McLaren factory in Woking sent a congratulatory crate of champagne and a bespoke carbon fiber keychain engraved, "For Emily, drive fast, stay humble." Derek's tearful apology video, filmed in his apartment bathroom ring light, harsh, racked up 200,000 dislikes in an hour. Victor quietly updated his LinkedIn to independent sales consultant. Harrington appeared on Good Morning America tie askew, pledging to donate 5% of Apex's Q3 profits to anti-bullying charities. The anchor asked if Ozzy would join him. Harrington smiled thinly. Mr. Osbourne prefers to let his actions speak. Emily's first act as a supercar owner was not a joyride down the PCH. At 10:00 a.m., she arrived at the dealership in an Uber, still wearing the borrowed sweats, and asked to speak to the valets. Mateo, the TikTok kid, was summoned from the wash bay, suds dripping from his elbows. Emily handed him the key fob. "Teach me to drive stick," she said, "and you get first passenger ride." They spent the afternoon in the empty parking garage. Beneath the building McLaren growling through gears, Emily stalling twice, laughing until her ribs hurt. Mateo filmed nothing. By sunset, they were doing donuts in the loading dock tires, squealing hymns to freedom. Ozzy, meanwhile, had vanished. His publicist issued a statement, "Ozzy is unavailable for comment. He's busy being a dad, a husband, and a human." But at 4:42 p.m., a grainy photo surfaced on a Black Sabbath fan forum. Ozzy at a Santa Monica pier, hot dog stand, hoodie up feeding quarters into a battered arcade machine, Galaga 1981 vintage. The poster swore he heard Ozzy mutter bollocks every time he died. The image was shared 40,000 times before moderators could verify it. Comments ranged from, "Even the Prince of Darkness needs a high score," to "Then this is the real flex, living like the rest of us after dropping $350K on a stranger." That night, Emily's mother hosted an impromptu block party in Fontana. Neighbors brought folding chairs and extension cords. Someone strung Christmas lights between palm trees. The McLaren sat in the driveway like a silver spaceship among minivans. Kids took turns sitting in the driver's seat, pretending to rev the engine. Emily stood on the porch in a second-hand Black Sabbath tee she'd bought, online tamale in one hand, key fob in the other, watching headlights crawl past houses where she'd grown up delivering newspapers at 5 a.m. A reporter from Telemundo asked what she planned to do with the car. Emily thought for a long moment. "I'm going to learn to parallel park it," she said. "Then I'm going to drive it to every kid in this neighborhood who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere. And I'm going to let them sit in it. Because belonging isn't about what you drive, it's about who sees you." Across the country, classrooms paused. A high school sociology teacher in Detroit projected the TikTok clip and asked students to journal. When have you been judged by your cover? When have you judged someone else? In a Nashville community center, a support group for formerly incarcerated men watched the video and debated whether kindness could be a form of rebellion. In a Tokyo karaoke bar, salarymen toasted Ozzy with sake and sang Changes Off Key. The ripple became a wave. Ozzy surfaced once more unannounced at a small club in downtown LA, the Viper Room where River Phoenix had played his last show. He took the stage alone, acoustic guitar slung low, no set list. The crowd, maybe 200 people, expected hits. Instead, he played a new song, raw, unrecorded, titled The Receipt. The chorus went, "You can't buy the moment. When a stranger believes in you, keep the change. Keep the fame. Just don't keep the receipt. Keep the..." Phones stayed in pockets. Bartenders stopped pouring. When the final chord faded, Ozzy leaned into the mic. "This one's for Emily. And for every kid who's ever been told they're not enough." Then he walked off stage, out the back door, into the alley where Rudy waited with the Dodge Ram. No encore, no merch. Just the echo of a song that would never be sold. By week's end, her Respect receipt trended globally. Corporations scrambled to launch sensitivity campaigns. Apex Motors stock rose 8%. Emily enrolled in night classes business management with a minor in social entrepreneurship. She kept the McLaren, but added a vanity plate RSPCT1. And somewhere in Birmingham, Lillian Osborne framed a printout of her son's tweet and hung it above the kettle. Every morning, she made tea, read the words aloud, respect, money. Always. And smiled at the boy who used to steal coal but never stole anyone's dignity. The world had witnessed a transaction worth more than any supercar, a legend trading ego for empathy, a receptionist trading invisibility for impact, and millions of strangers trading cynicism for the radical idea that kindness could still outrun fame. The McLaren's odometer ticked past 200 miles, all of them driven with the top-down radio blasting Sabbath's Planet Caravan, Emily's laughter mixing with the exhaust note like a new kind of heavy metal harmony. And somewhere on the 405, Ozzy rolled down the window of the old Ram, let the wind take his cigarette smoke, and whispered to no one in particular, still crazy after all these years, but the right kind of crazy. The McLaren 720S Spider registration RSPCT1 sat under a tarp in the underground garage of a modest Echo Park duplex, its silver flanks dulled by a thin film of Los Angeles dust. Emily Thompson had not driven it for 3 weeks. Not because she feared the horsepower or the attention, but because every mile felt borrowed, every rev an echo of a moment that still seemed unreal. She rode the bus to her new part-time job at the dealership, same uniform, same desk, different eyes upon her, and walked the last 6 blocks home past murals of Frida Kahlo and lowriders on hydraulics. The car waited like a sleeping dragon patient, gleaming only when she pulled the cover back to check the tire pressure or run a microfiber cloth along the wing mirrors. On the passenger seat lay a spiral notebook filled with handwriting that was no longer shaky budgets, timelines, grant applications, the architecture of a dream taking shape. 6 months after the handover, Emily launched the Respect First initiative from a folding table at the Boyle Heights Community Center. No ribbon cutting, no press release, just a laminated sign taped to the door, open to anyone who's ever been told they don't belong. The program was simple on paper: micro-scholarships for service industry workers pursuing certificates or degrees paired with mandatory workshops titled The Customer is Human. Funding came from 3 sources: Emily's savings, the remainder of her first paycheck after taxes, a matching grant from the Osbourne Family Foundation delivered anonymously via a Birmingham postmark, and crowdsourced donations that trickled in after a viral GoFundMe titled, Let's Pay Emily Forward. The first cohort was 12 strong, a Starbucks barista, studying nursing, a hotel valet, training to be an EMT, a Lyft driver, enrolled in culinary school. They met every Tuesday night in a room that smelled of instant coffee and possibility. Emily taught the first session herself. She wheeled in a portable projector, cued the original TikTok clip, now at 180 million views, and let it play in silence. When Ozzy's voice filled the room, "She's the only one who treated me like a human being." The barista Marisol began to cry. Not from sentiment, but recognition. Last week, she said, wiping her eyes with a sleeve, a lady in a Tesla yelled at me for spelling her name wrong on the cup. I wanted to quit. Emily nodded, clicked to the next slide, a photo of the McLaren parked outside a South LA high school hood, up 20 teenagers crowded around the engine bay. That same week, Emily continued, I took the car to Jefferson High. Let the auto shop kids measure the brake calipers. One of them, a sophomore named Diego, told me he'd never been closer than a poster to anything worth more than his mom's rent. Now, he's interning at Apex on Saturdays. Respect isn't a slogan. It's access. Across the country, the ripple widened into currents. In Chicago, a luxury dealership chain rewrote its dress code policy after a viral thread from a former employee we were trained to profile. Ozzy proved the profile is worthless. In Glasgow, a pub renamed its Sunday roast, the Osbourne Special, all proceeds to a local food bank. In Sydney, a heavy metal festival added a Respect First stage, where unsigned bands played for tips that funded music lessons for foster kids. None of these carried Ozzy's name in bold letters. They simply cited the incident in Beverly Hills the way one cites gravity, undeniable, foundational. Ozzy himself had gone quiet, in the way only legends can. No interviews, no victory lap. He surfaced only in fragments, a grainy photo of him buying vinyl at Amoeba Records, another of him pushing a shopping cart at a Midlands Tesco in slippers. Sharon posted an Instagram story once, Ozzy asleep on the sofa, their rescue dog Kelly curled on his chest, caption, "Still my madman." The world took it as proof he was resting, recharging. In truth, he was building. From a converted barn on the grounds of his Buckinghamshire estate, Ozzy assembled a team of 4, a social worker from Aston, a former Sabbath roadie turned coder, a Birmingham school principal, and Rudy, still driving, still silent. They called themselves the Invisible Committee. Their mandate: identify service workers who had performed small, verifiable acts of dignity under pressure, then intervene with life-altering support. No cameras, no credit. The first recipient was a Manchester bus driver who, during a blizzard, had driven an elderly passenger door to door after her stop was cancelled. She received an electric wheelchair van title in her name maintenance for life. The second was a Tokyo convenience store clerk who memorized the allergies of every regular customer. He woke to find a fully stocked food truck parked outside his apartment keys, on the dash note reading, "Feed your neighborhood." I.O. the only initials ever used. Emily learned of the Invisible Committee only by accident. A barista from her cohort received a similar van, same matte black wrap, same unsigned note. When she asked Ozzy about it during a surprise video call arranged by Sharon as a birthday gift, he shrugged on the grainy screen. World's full of Emily's love. Just trying to keep up. Then he asked about her parallel parking progress, and they spent 20 minutes debating the merits of the McLaren's launch control versus a manual gearbox. When the call ended, Emily stared at the frozen frame of Ozzy mid-laugh and understood the car had never been the gift. The gift was permission to believe her kindness had scale. 1 year to the day after the dealership incident, Respect First hosted its first graduation. 24 students, double the original cohort, received certificates in a park amphitheater in East LA. The McLaren served as the podium hood, propped open diploma boxes stacked on the carbon fiber intake. Families brought folding chairs and potluck tamales. A mariachi band played a metal-infused version of Crazy Train that had the abuelas dancing. Emily wore the same black uniform shirt, name tag polished, but now paired with jeans and the quiet authority of someone who had turned a moment into a movement. She invited no celebrities, no politicians. The only surprise guest arrived on a battered Harley Ozzy helmet, under arm-beard streaked with road dust. He refused the microphone instead, taking a seat in the back row beside Marisol's grandmother, sharing her bag of chicharrones. When the final graduate, a hotel housekeeper who had earned her real estate license, crossed the makeshift stage, Ozzy stood. The crowd hushed. He did not speak to them. He spoke to the graduate's voice raw from a lifetime of screaming anthems. "You lot think today's about a piece of paper. It's not. It's about the day someone looked at you and saw more than the uniform, the accent, the postcode. That's the day the world changes. Not with money. Not with fame. With recognition." He pulled a small tin from his pocket, Altoids half empty, and shook it. Inside were a dozen brass tokens, each stamped with a tiny bat silhouette. "One for each of you. Spend it anywhere. It's worthless. But it reminds the person who takes it that respect is the only currency that multiplies when you give it always." He handed the tin to Emily. "Your turn to keep the change." The ceremony ended not with applause, but with action. Graduates fanned out into the park, approaching strangers, vendors, joggers, parents with strollers, and pressed a token into their palms with the same sentence, "You are seen." Within an hour, the park was dotted with people turning the brass circles over in their fingers, reading the inscription on the back, "Respect, first pass it on." A food truck owner taped his to the order window. A skateboarder threaded his onto a shoelace. By nightfall, the tokens had traveled to Venice Beach, Koreatown, the Metro Red Line. One ended up in the tip jar of a Dublin pub, where a tourist recognized the bat and posted a photo Ozzy Osbourne was here. Or his ghost. Either way, pints on me. Emily drove the McLaren home at 2:30 a.m., top-down city lights strobing across the windshield. She parked in the alley behind her duplex, cut the engine, and sat in the sudden silence. The odometer read 9,847 miles, most logged on weekends, ferrying kids from South Central to the Griffith Observatory, the Getty, the ocean they'd never seen. She opened the glove box and removed the original key fob, now wrapped in a faded Black Sabbath wristband Ozzy had left in the cup holder the night of the graduation. Tucked inside was a note in his spidery scrawl. The car was never the point. The driving is. Keep the wheel. Oh. She walked upstairs past the mural of Frida and opened her laptop. On the desktop was a single folder, Respect, First Year 2. Inside, applications from 312 new candidates, partnership offers from 3 community colleges, a draft curriculum titled Empathy as Capital. She added one more file, a scanned photograph of the brass token in her palm, bat side up. Caption, Currency of the Future. Then she closed the laptop, stepped onto the tiny balcony, and looked out over the city that had once made her feel invisible. Somewhere below, a low rider bounced to NIB. A siren wailed, then faded. The McLaren ticked as it cooled metal, contracting like a heartbeat, slowing after a solo. Ozzy, 3,000 miles away, stood on the roof of his barn under a sky thick with stars. He held no phone, no cigarette, just the night air and the faint smell of hay. Rudy's voice drifted up from the courtyard. Boss, the Manchester driver, sent a video. "She's delivering meals to pensioners in the van." Ozzy nodded to himself, then spoke to the darkness. "Good. That's one more, Emily." He turned, descended the wooden stairs, and disappeared into the house where Sharon waited with tea and the dogs. The barn door rolled shut. The stars kept their counsel. In Echo Park, Emily fell asleep to the sound of distant bass and the soft click of the McLaren's cooling fans. In her dream, she was driving not the supercar, but a school bus painted matte black, filled with children wearing brass tokens like medals. The road stretched endless, borderless every mile, paved with the quiet certainty that respect once given could never be repossessed. When she woke, the sun was rising over the mural of Frida gilding the McLaren's tarp in molten gold. She pulled on jeans, laced her boots, and walked downstairs. The dragon was awake. The city was waiting. And somewhere in 1,000 small transactions, a smile for a stranger, a door held open, a name remembered, the lesson lived on, multiplying like compound interest, in the only bank that never closed, the human heart.